Everybody, I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Weaver from the Winnipeg Free Press. Together we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after a good one. I thought that was a good one. Didn't you? Out there in Kenny and Renny land, didn't you think that was a good game? I mean, it doesn't turn out the way that the vast majority of you would be hoping. Tracy O says, oof, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. It's one way to look at it. I think I'm going to look at it a little bit of a different way. I don't necessarily think a night like this is a massive, massive negative. Yeah, of course, people would have liked to have seen the Winnipeg Jets come away with the points in this game. They don't. I'm going to tell you why I think that this is something that is, something to be, I don't know, happy, maybe not happy about, but hopeful. Hopeful would be a good word for fans who are hoping to see the Winnipeg Jets become a team that gets back to competing the way that they've become accustomed to competing the last couple of years. So why don't we hop in and take the opening drive for Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent and talk about this whole thing. Building. That's what I think I'm seeing the Winnipeg Jets do. There are games leading up to this that I know that Scott Arneal had talked about, liking certain games and building towards certain things. I haven't been lockstep in some of the games that he had thought were, these big building steps. I go back to that Buffalo Sabres game that they played and beat the Buffalo Sabres 5-2. I didn't look at that as a very impressive game by the Winnipeg Jets. And as such, I was somewhat surprised. Not at all surprised that the next game they followed up with is getting absolutely waxed by the Edmonton Oilers. I thought a far better game than that was the Dallas Stars game, in which they lose that game 4-3. I thought that was, you'll go back and listen to this very same Jim Pattison Toyota opening on Drive a few shows ago, where I talked about that game giving me the most reason to believe in the Winnipeg Jets. In some time, they follow that up with a game that was a little bit frustrating against the Boston Bruins, where you saw parts of the Winnipeg Jets being themselves, and then you saw the kind of wide open giveaways or turnovers or maybe bad plays allowed in their own zone. You didn't get that against the Washington Capitals, right? And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to kind of, maybe hold people in check about that last game. I do think that last game that they played against the Washington Capitals was the best game the Winnipeg Jets played all year. I also thought that, based on what I've seen from the Washington Capitals, that it wasn't very good representation of the Washington Capitals, that they didn't have that good of a game. When Ethan Frank, who I thought was their best player, is the best player for your team in that game, it means that your stars aren't going in that game. So, yes, it looked good to see the Winnipeg Jets do what they did against the Washington Capitals. But if you were watching this in reverse and you saw a team beating up on your team and you looked at your team and you knew your team wasn't playing a very good game, that would kind of alter the way you thought about it. You'd say, well, not the biggest deal. They didn't have their best game, No excuses. I've said this in the past. The Winnipeg Jets, I thought what they did really good in that last game was, okay, you don't want to come with your fastball, then we're just going to hit homers off you all night. And that's what they did. And that's what the Winnipeg Jets did last year if you didn't bring your A game. And so that was a build that I saw there. I know they lose this game, and I know that there's going to be people frustrated that they didn't hold the lead. I don't necessarily not see this game as a build, though. So the backstory on the Senators coming into this game is there was a lot of belief in their dressing room, and a lot of belief in their coach's room, that the last 6 games that the Senators played, they could have won. And they were just not finding, I don't even think finding ways to lose. They, weren't getting the right save at the right time. They weren't getting, they're not getting the scoring that they've been looking for. And I think you saw a little bit of that from that team tonight. But they were playing good hockey. They felt they were playing good hockey, and like the Winnipeg Jets, felt that they were playing better hockey. What you had was 2 teams here who've fallen below the playoff line, who a lot of people expect more out of them. So it was almost like the Spider-Man meme tonight. 2 teams looking at each other and kind of pointing at each other. And what I thought was I saw a fairly even first period, probably give the Winnipeg Jets a little bit of an edge, but a fairly even first period. Then what I saw was a second period in which I started thinking, well, the Winnipeg Jets are falling behind in this game. And they were for the first 11 minutes of that game, fell behind on the scoreboard as well. Then Adam Lowry's line went out and had a last year's shift. That's what we'll call these things from now on, because everyone knew we talked extensively about the blueprint. Everyone knows what that means. They had a last year's shift. And I texted Ken, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I texted Ken, because it's I can't remember a couple of days ago where we had the old Johnny Carson holding this to holding the envelope to your forehead and telling you what happened. This was a little bit prophetic on my part here. If you give me just 1 second, I had said, oh, wait a minute. Am I going to be able to find this? Oh, no, I'm going way back to the Caps here. Give me 1 second here, please. And I am going to. Okay, I said, keep your eye on how the team responds after that last Lowry shift. Blueprint laid down. And if you remember this, for the last number of years, Adam Lowry, and I know Nito Niederreiter found himself on a different line, but that line was all about establishing the blueprint. Listen, this is how we need to play. This is how we gain momentum. Now you come out the next shift and match us. And then the next thing I write to Ken is C. And why I wrote C is because the very next shift, the Jets top line goes out. They start grinding a little bit. The Senators get the puck out of their zone, goes down the other way. They come back and they grind and they grind and they score. Neil Pionka lets a bomb go and boom, it's in the back of the net. That to me is building. And why that's building is because a major tenet of the Winnipeg Jets season for the last number of seasons has been a third line, and maybe they're the second line right now, but that led the way, that grinded, that wore down opponents, that put them on their heels, that smacked them in the mouth. And then the rest of the Winnipeg Jets went in and finished the job. And that's what you saw here tonight. And that's what you saw continue on after that until the end of the second period. So you actually saw what made the Winnipeg Jets successful last year. You only saw it for about 9 minutes, and it was halted after the period ended. But if you are looking for a blueprint, we talked about this before. We talked about the Jets' speed. We talked about, different things that make them look like themselves. One of the things they did really well tonight was their defensemen were activating. They were holding the line, got really, really good at that, and just completely took over that game for those 9 minutes. That is something to build on now, because you've got the muscle memory of what that feels like and what it should feel like to play Winnipeg Jets hockey. Then they go into the third period and the Ottawa Senators take back over. And for the vast majority of that period, I think Ottawa is pushing. I think the Winnipeg Jets decided to go into a little bit of a defensive shell. I think in the past, when the Winnipeg Jets play that defensive shell, because they're a little bit more on their toes, they're a little bit more used to creating mistakes on the other team that's upping its risk profile. Those mistakes often ended up in the back of the net. And there you go. The game's over. Comes down to the end. A play where I just think, nice play by Sanderson. I do have to say, use the Jets' aggression against them, recognized how the Jets were defending, and recognized that as he passes that puck, Mark Scheifele is trying to defend the pass so hard that maybe he turns it over and sets it up ice. And then as Mark Scheifele bites on that, he slams on the brakes and fires the puck down the open lane. Mark Scheifele does something that I think is just one of these, like, you're on the ice, you're playing, you try and affect the play, right? Doesn't turn out to be the smartest thing to do. Redirects the puck. It ends up in the back of his net. And there you go. You go to overtime where it's 50-50. You know how I feel about the overtime. Winnipeg Jets showed what they needed to show during the regular part of the game. They didn't get that extra point, but that's just, a 3-on-3 fest, which I think has nothing to do with hockey, and no commentary on what the Winnipeg Jets accomplished here on this night. This, to me, is a lot of the blueprint was showing on this night. And while the Winnipeg Jets don't come away with the 2 points, they do come away, I think, with a lot more feeling of what it should feel like to play their style of game. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think they get more out of those moments in that game against the Ottawa Senators than they did against a Washington Capitals team that really didn't show up in full force in their previous game. This is a reason to build. This is a reason to believe the Winnipeg Jets are now starting to put a more and more consistent representation of what they are actually trying to put on the ice, going back to that Dallas Stars game, heading in the right direction. And for me, I know a lot of people are going to think this is a step back. For me, this is a step forward. That is your opening drive, brought to you by the fine folks at Jim Pattison Toyota. And hey, this December, it's time to Toyota at Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent. Lease the 2025 Tacoma 4x4 SR5 truck from just $116 weekly for 64 months at 6.59% with $7,699 down and a $1,500 accessory credit. But hurry, the offer ends on December 31st. Visit Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent for a test drive today. All right, folks, I've gone on long enough. It's been an empty green room, and I've needed to do a little tap dancing until someone got in there. But he is in there, folks, the man with the best music in the business. Here comes Kenny. Kenny, good to see you, my friend. Got a nice little decoration going on there with the Christmas tree in the background, looking sharp. Well, looking sharper is you up in the foreground there, of course, rocking some Vittorio Rossi gear like I am right now. And I went in and had just, it's like it's a man's version of the day at the spa. Went in, saw Frankie and the boys, did me up right, because of course that's what he does. Measured me out for a suit, measured me out for some pants, all the things that you could be doing if you wanted to look as good as Kenny and Renny. So if you do, head on down there to Vittorio Rossi on court and walk in, loudly proclaim Kenny and Renny sent you. Ask for Frankie and the boys, and they will do you up right. Ken, some people are going to accuse Renny here of seeing fool's gold in a game here that a lot of people are just frustrated about. Am I seeing too much?
Well, first of all, sorry, I sound like a guy who let you down a lot today. Couldn't make it into Vittorio Rossi to see Frankie and the boys with you like I had hoped for. I had some other work engagements, so I apologize for that. I apologize to Frankie. Also, sorry for keeping you tap dancing. I experienced a little bit of a gong show trying to get out of the parking lot, Sean. So that was a little bit of a challenge. So I apologize for being a smidge late here today. But yeah, I mean, fool's gold, I would not say would be the case. I mean, lots of pieces of the template for sure. I thought that the slow start was something that, again, we saw an exceptional start against Washington. So interesting, Sean. Some parallels. 2 early penalties. Jets killed them off, just like they did against Washington. But they took a while to get on their way in the offensive side. There was a little bit of sleepwalking coming out of the gate. You were there. Scott O'Neill expressed some frustration with that in his post game. But yeah, I mean, I know you touched on it, but yeah, I mean, the Lowry line playing to its identity again and setting the table for the goal that came after that. So I thought that was definitely something that, now it's a couple games in a row here, 2-3 games in a row, even though, the line has had different people on it in the last 3 games. The last 2 games, the unit with Lowry, Iafallo, and Barron looked like a line that can be a shutdown line for this Winnipeg Jets team. And I mean, Scott O'Neill talked about it in the morning, Sean. Adam Lowry's at his best and thriving when he knows he's going up against the other opposition's top centerman. The Jets haven't had the opportunity to do that as often as they would have liked this year, just based on how the line has looked a little bit different. And maybe it took a while to get up to speed. But Yeah, I mean, I think there are tenets of the game that the Jets will be really happy with, things they can reinforce in their meetings as they get set here. But um, I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a lot of those things. But Sean, I like the fact that even though the Jets have struggled to find consistency, I think the fact that they're holding themselves to a high standard, that nobody is doing, there's no tap down, people are not fired up and separating their shoulders on after a 1-2-1 homestand. So that is also an important part of this equation. I think that the players and the coaching staff are unhappy with that, even though probably, Sean, I think to your point, I think Scott Arniel, who has been wondering where the consistency has been for quite a long time, can look to the homestand and think there were quite a few chunks of parts of games where the Jets are starting to look the way that he hopes that they look for a little bit longer than they have looked like in the first, 26 or 27 games. So I'm with you on that front for sure. Definitely room for improvement. I mean, some guys weren't at their best. We know that.
Oh yeah.
But overall, they're starting to stack games. And again, this is no cause for celebration or planning parade routes, but for a team that had been way too Jekyll and Hyde, at least in terms of the mistakes that they were making and the glaring errors, those avoidable mistakes, there are a couple of avoidable mistakes in this game as well, but I don't think it was, they weren't the same kind of mistakes we were seeing earlier on in the year. Well, I mean, I guess it's part of coverage, yes, but this seemed like more of a kind of a brain cramp on the first one. I mean, we'll just get right into it. I know that I'll give you a chance to respond because I know you have thoughts also.
Well, hold on, but before you go there, I just want to like touch on the point that you're making there and touch on what Dylan DeMello had to say about it. I thought, and I know where you're going with this, because the Scheifele thing in the end is something that puts the puck in the back of the net, and the mistake made on the first goal is kind of like the kind of blown coverage that leaves you like kind of dumbfounded by it. But I will say this, because for the most part, outside of those things, which ended up in the back of the net, you had a Winnipeg Jets team that I thought defended and protected the home plate a lot better, similar to what it did in that last game, where we got the response this morning based on that last game from Dylan DeMello, who had said, and it's interesting because Dylan DeMello saw, I think, what you and I saw with Eric Carmi. Now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say just quickly about Eric Carmi. He clearly wasn't the answer. And I don't know how to describe what happens with Connor Hellebuyck coming into the lineup that allows the team to kind of snap to it more. But I asked Dylan DeMello just about that. What is it about that snap-to-itiveness that they had in front of Connor Hellebuyck? And he didn't really have an answer. But what he did say was like, look, that game that we played against Washington, I like to think that we would have handily won that game with Eric Comrie in net. And I would also like to suggest that we've hung out to dry Eric Comrie on far too many nights, and that he deserved better than what we gave him. So it's funny because I think this is one of these things where a lot of the people who have kind of attacked our analysis on Comrie are both right and wrong, as we're both right and wrong, right? Because in the end here, I do think that Eric Comrie was hung out to dry in ways that Connor Hellebuyck has not been this year. So I think we were right about that when, a lot of the people are saying, oh, Eric Comrie is not stopping this, not stopping that. Well, like the degree of difficulty went way up. But what those folks are right about is whatever it is about Connor Hellebuyck that the team plays around him, whether it's confidence, whether it's vibes in the room, whatever it is, they play a different game that allows Connor Hellebuyck to not have to face those sweeping, cross ice passes and diving across to try and stop open net goals and things like that. But that said, there was that one mistake there, Ken, that you were just about to launch into that really, it was, I can't remember a time when a blown coverage or a mess up in structure has left a number of us in the press box go, whoa, like what happened there with Shen taking the wrong side of the ice literally left people agog on what could they possibly be doing that allowed Nick Cousins to be as alone as he was.
Sure. And I mean, actually, Sean, it's 2 games ago. This happened it's in a similar manner when both Logan Stanley and Josh Morrissey got caught on the left side and Sean Corrali was left all alone in front, but he was stationary, whereas Nick Cousins was entering the zone with some speed, which kind of made it a little bit more of a curious decision. And again, without asking the player or being able to ask the player what was going through his mind, the best answer I can give is that Schenn thought he had to get over to the right side because he's a right defenseman. But obviously Neil Pionk was kind of already there. And then the Jets kind of just got confused, it looked like, both in terms of the back pressure. And then by the time the Jets, I think it was Scheifele was the trailer, by the time he realized that Schenn had overcommitted to the right-hand side, it was kind of too late to catch Cousins. So it was one of those that looked like, it's obviously a strange play all around. And you also don't see pucks that kind of, like Connor Hellebuyck gets 80 or 90% of it, and it kind of shoots over top of him. So it was just kind of an all-encompassing strange play there. And again, I mean, in terms of the tying goal, I mean, you touched on it, but I mean, it's a reactionary play. And immediately after Scheifele sticks his stick out with one hand, he's waving the magic wand out there, Sean. He knows that he shouldn't have done it, but it's a reactionary play. Again, I'm not saying this is a street hockey or, ODR special, but your tendency is to react that way, even though you kind of know that if you can't block it, you shouldn't get your stick in there, but you understand why it happened. I mean, again, I'm not absolving Mark, but I'm also not, you're not blaming him because, Sean, here's the facts. The Jets had control of the puck. Kyle Connor's got to get that puck out, right? He had control of it in the D zone. The failed clear is what leads to the scoring chance and, allows. So again, there's parts of blame to be handed out all around. And I mean, ultimately it doesn't matter in terms of who gets the majority or any of the blame, because for the Jets, that's a game where they need 2 points and they're forced to, settle for one. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. And, again, there's the whole points lost versus points gained. Well, it can be both, but when a team is in the position where they put themselves below the line, they got to close those games out, Sean. I mean, you've said it a lot of times now, and it's 100% accurate. We can't judge the Jets by last year, but what we know, Sean, is that in that situation last year, there were very few blown leads for a team that got the lead in the third period, especially that late. That's when the boa constrictor came out and squeezed the life out of the opposition. Today, they left the door open, and Jake Sanderson kicked it down, and then he kicked it down again, right? Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's an interesting situation for the Jets because, again, I'm with you. There's a lot of things that they will take out of it, but also kind of missed it's representative of the homestand itself. 1-2-1 is a missed opportunity homestand for a team that, used to be dominant at home. Now they're kind of been mediocre at home. So that's something that, again, and Sean, look at the next two home opponents. They are the Minnesota Wild, who just made the biggest trade in the NHL this year, and the Edmonton Oilers, who have, assessed and addressed their goaltending. And they're looking like the team that went to the last two Stanley Cup finals and went 7 games once and 6 games another time against the juggernaut Panthers. Yeah. So, and even more so, the next 3 games for the Jets against Central Division opponents. Now, St. Louis, tough one today. Again, Dylan Holloway's out. That's a big blow. But they're right there with the Jets. So that's a game they need to have their best in. The game on Friday, we know, is going to be a measuring stick game for one of those teams, and probably not the team that's running away with the Central. And then you wrap it up against a Utah Mammoth team that, Sean, you've talked about it a lot. They've got a blueprint on how to play the Jets, and they've executed that game plan and template pretty well in the last 4 meetings or 5 meetings. Yeah. So no easy games for the Jets coming up, but they also have an opportunity to build on what they've done on this homestand. Now, again, that gets back to consistency and the things that have sort of been missing from the Jets game earlier on. So it's going to be a fascinating stretch of time, these next 5 games. Again, we say it all the time, but this is a 5-game block where we are going to learn a lot about the Winnipeg Jets, I think.
Yeah.
And where they're at.
I'd like to bring in this comment from Scardy because I know Scardy doesn't agree with me, and that's okay. I mean, this is just my take on this, and it's what I saw. And I know it can be difficult to look at a loss and say that's actually a good thing. He says, "I hope Renny is right. I thought the Jets were tentative and listless for much of the game. The 6-on-5 felt inevitable." This is what I think about this. So people look, and I somewhat agree with this, although I wouldn't describe it the same way. I'm going to try and describe what I see because I understand what Scardy is saying here. Everyone sees the Winnipeg Jets play that 9 minutes of the second period, the last 9 minutes of the second period, and they think, okay, finally, here it is, right? You go and you talk to the Ottawa Senators on the other side of it, and the Ottawa Senators are like, oh my God, did we handle that terribly? And they did. Like, if you see that, and even in the first period, they bobbled a lot of pucks. They weren't handling things well. They got a lot of pucks when the Jets were on the forecheck and just turned around and gave it right back to them, often in the same zone. Like, they didn't handle that well. But that's what the Winnipeg Jets did last year over and over and over again. So I think someone like Scardy sees the Winnipeg Jets do that, and they think this is what it should look like all the time, because that's what it looked like all the time last year. Now, we've had conversations. I'm on the record saying I don't think the Winnipeg Jets as currently constructed can be what they were last year. But I go back to my analysis a couple of games ago where I talked about the Toby Keith song. I'm not as good as once.
Yeah.
I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was. And I think that's what you see. This is what that was. The Winnipeg Jets were able to come out and make that push. And they did so for 9 minutes. And when they did it, they were highly effective. But the Winnipeg Jets last year were the unstoppable force. Once they got going, there was just nothing that you were going to do. The Winnipeg Jets this year can be that unstoppable force in stretches, but you could see in that game, the Winnipeg Jets also had a hard time keeping up with the with the Ottawa Senators at various points of that game for much of the third period, and definitely the beginning of the second period when the Ottawa Senators were running away with that. So while I wouldn't say that they were tentative and listless, I would say that they can make these pushes, but it's kind of like a boxer who can like mount, a flurry of punches and punches and punches, and then gets to the degree where they kind of punch themselves out. Now you got to be able to play defense. And so what I think Scardy looks at as being tentative and listless, and I would say the third period, and this is kind of how I wanted to transition this and talk to what you're talking about, the Jets' ability to close out games. The Jets last year looked like a team that tried to close out games by just saying, sorry, we're going to take the puck and you don't get it back, and we're just going to keep cramming it down your throat, right? But if you get it in our zone, we're going to play really good defensively and kind of like keep you to the outside. That's what I saw from the Winnipeg Jets was the second half of that. I didn't see them bowling the opposition over. I didn't see them cramming it down the Ottawa Senators' throat. And what had seemed to happen is it built and it built and it built, which is why I agree with Scardy, although I didn't think that I definitely thought that the Ottawa Senators were giving themselves a lot of good chances towards the end of it. I don't know if I thought it felt inevitable, but maybe Scardy saw something more than I saw. But what I did see was a Winnipeg Jets team that, how he said, it's hard for them to come back in games, the loss of Nikolai Ehlers, all those little kind of things, the little things about what made that team good last year that have such a huge effect kind of works in reverse here. I don't know that the Winnipeg Jets are going to be able to skate you out of the rink for 60 minutes. And I think what we're seeing from the Winnipeg Jets now as they try to figure out their way, you at home, you're hoping that the Winnipeg Jets are just building and building and building and building and building so that finally those 9 minutes, those last 9 minutes of the second period become 20 minutes of the second period and 20 minutes of the first period and 20 minutes of the third period. I could be wrong, Ken. I don't think that's happening. I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to be a team that can get to that style of game for parts of the game. And then the rest of that game, they need to figure out how to win games or hold off an opponent when they are the oldest team in the NHL and typically not as fast as their opposition. The fact of the matter is, outside of those 9 minutes, I thought it was plainly evident that the Ottawa Senators were the faster team on this night. I think that's in the end what allows them to get back into and win this game. And I think that that's what we're going to be watching now. Mark this down, get this episode 32, 30 minutes, halfway through this show. Renny says that what the Winnipeg Jets are going to look like is parts of what they were last year for spurts, but they're not going to be able to continue that for, and if they do get to it for a whole game, I don't think you're going to see it happen 1, 2, 3, 4 games in a row. I think it's going to be up and down, and I think it's going to be a Winnipeg Jets team that needs to find a way to find its energy from night to night, and that means up one night, down one night, up one night, down one night, up one period, down one period, up one shift, down one shift. I think that that's just going to be the reality for the Winnipeg Jets. The consistency that they're searching for, Ken, is not going to be the consistency that they found last year. However, to the point you made earlier on, their last 4 games look a lot more like what they were supposed to do. They're grabbing more parts of the game and bending it in their direction. And that's what consistency is going to look for them on this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting theory. I mean, I personally don't know about inevitability. I didn't see a tentative team. I mean, I don't know that they were necessarily on their toes. I think to your point, Sean, that might have more to do with the speed of the Senators. But I mean, the Jets were fairly physical. I didn't see them sitting back. It's not like this was a barrage and the Jets were hanging on for dear life and Hellebuck had to make a bunch of 10 bellers just to get them to overtime. I mean, they were in control of the third period for a good chunk of it. So is it perfect? No. I mean, they've got lots of things that need to get going. I mean, they got 2 lines going, which is more than they had going before, Sean. This was a 1-line hockey team for a big stretch of time. Right now, I would say they've got 2 out of the 4 lines going. But you know what that means? It means 2 lines aren't going. So you're not going to be a Stanley Cup contender if you only have 2 of your 4 lines going. And, that's various players on the lines and guys in general, the lines aren't as cohesive as they need to be. And again, it's not only about points, but those guys got to produce more. I mean, it's very simple, but I mean, it's another big step forward, another great game for Morgan Barron. And I don't just say this because I wrote a pregame article on him today after a really good talk with Adam Lowry about how, the growth he's seen in Morgan Barron, who's a guy that he played on a line with, before Nino Niederreiter arrived here. Alex Iafallo is found another level that he hadn't found for a good chunk of the first, quarter of the season. Adam Lowry, again, moving better than he had earlier, which is no surprise given the nature of the injury. You can't just push fast forward and, you'd love to go to February and March where your body's healed and you've built up your strength and your puck touches feel better. But that line's starting to take big steps forward. I mean, those things would be positives for the Jets. But the flip side of that coin is that the lines centered by both Vladislav Namestnikov and Jonathan Toews aren't performing at a level or at a high enough level. I mean, we've talked about Vlad Namestnikov a ton. You can't not talk about someone who's gone from being the second line center and a productive one to a guy that has 1 assist in 20 games. I mean, we know he's trying, the effort is there, but that's a cold plunge, like Arctic Circle style right now for him. Toews is not getting anything going offensively either, Sean. So we know that both of those lines are going to have to find another level and play at a better space for the Jets to have consistency. So, it'll be an interesting time. So, but again, I didn't see them playing tentatively, but I mean, there could be a reactionary element to your point about the speed, but again, I know where he's coming from. I just don't think that this was a game where the Jets were, vastly outplayed or hanging on for dear life. It was an even game.
No,
and that's no surprise given where the teams are in the standings. They're basically at the same place.
I agree, and I would say I think that the tentative I've explained it. What I think he's seeing is in comparison to last year, where the team would just third period cram it down your throat, versus this year where it seemed like they were. I thought they were holding on a little bit more. Regardless, we got to get to what I think is a great, well, never mind Canada. I'm going to hand it out. Handing out the Flame and Comfort to a question. I always love giving the hot takes to the questions because they set the show on fire when they're good. And Pat Rathwell asking a lot about what a lot of the other people were asking here. He says, Renny, do you think Arniel needs to take some blame for having 91-7 out there in OT? Needs speed guys 3-on-3? I think this is a great question, and I think it's very worthy of the Flame and Comfort hot take of the game because of that. And hey, that of course is your K&R hot take, brought to you by Flame and Comfort, Manitoba's premier supplier of fireplaces, wood stoves, inserts, and everything hearth related. After 50 years heating up your world, Flame and Comfort has moved to 1465 St. James Street, where you will find when you get there, it is one of the most impressive showrooms in Western Canada. You don't need your hot takes to keep that warm feeling inside, folks. You can visit Flame and Comfort, and they'll take care of it for you. And Ken, I dare say our audience is asking for the Pristine Roofing wake-up call for Scott Arniel with the way that he put his players out there in that overtime. Of course, that means time to give North End Rick the Pristine Roofing wake-up call at 204-981-6289. He's the one you want down at your place for all your roofing, siding, and exterior needs. You can also call Pristine Roofing directly at 204-237-7663. Give your home the Pristine Roofing and Siding wake-up call. You will be glad that you did. Ken, what did you think about the utilization of players in overtime?
Well, I mean, it's interesting for sure. I mean, I definitely had an eyebrow raise when Gustav Nyquist was sent out over the boards for the second shift. Sure. But I mean, this is a guy who's played 3-on-3 in his career. I get it. And in terms of the speed element, like for Pat, Vlad Nemestikov's a faster skater than Gabe Vilardi is. So if it's only about speed, then that can't work. But I also am in favor of Gabe Vilardi seeing the ice in overtime. And Sean, we know we've talked about this for the last 2 months. Cole Perfetti is not the same player that he was last year, but for a guy we've been saying needs to produce more, he's got 3 assists in his last 4 games. So I got no problem with Scott Arniel putting him over the boards, thinking that, you know, the intelligence of Cole Perfetti might free up something for a faster player in overtime. So, yeah, I mean, Morgan Barron, would I like to see him out in overtime? Sure. I mean, the guy's got great wheels. He's on a little bit of a mini heater again. I've got no problem with that. I mean, again, it's shootouts and overtime. It's a lot about feel, Sean, right? I mean, what the coach is thinking is who he thinks. He's not just throwing guys out there because he doesn't think they can get the job done. He's got a gut feeling on guys being able to, you know, come through. And we've talked about this, Sean. When you need secondary scoring, I don't think it's a surprise that he's tossing some of those guys out over the boards. Do I think they should go over the boards instead of highly productive guys like Gabe Vilardi? Not necessarily, but I can understand why he might think someone like Vlad Nemestikov, who is a good skater and has created some opportunities here during the cold spell, that he might have a chance to break out. But again, it's the coach generally knows his team better than you or I or the fans. That's not to say that the fans' points aren't valid, because they are on various occasions, including this one. But yeah, I mean, I was curious about some of the usage, but I also understand the reasoning behind it. So
how much of it, Ken, do you think is potentially, like, I know what you're saying.
And the other part too, Sean, Perfetti and Sandberg last year combined on 2 overtime games in a row. So, I mean, I think there's an element that the coach thinks that you can maybe draw on some of those experiences from the past.
Right, but you're talking about last year, where we're talking about leaving the hottest scorer on the Winnipeg Jets on the bench in the most crucial part of the game, or maybe the easiest time to score, in favor of people who, yes, may have shown some chemistry, but showed it last year. I wonder, Ken, and I think that this is just human nature. But, you know, you're talking about a coach who has a gut feeling and this and that and whatever. And but when you're struggling, maybe the gut is a little bit harder to read. And I just wonder how much of this, the Gus Nyquist, who earlier on in the game, Ken, I had texted you, he was on for the beginning of a power play where
bad shift.
A really bad shift, and basically killed the first minute of the Winnipeg Jets power play in that situation. So to see him out there again, I thought it was a little bit strange. Now, I keep thinking to myself, and maybe I'm off on this, but every time I see these players out there, the Cole Perfettis who aren't going, but getting this opportunity. And the Gus Nyquist, who has yet to get going this season, getting that opportunity, I can't help but feel like it's wishful thinking. Like it's a coach that's saying, geez, if I could just get this guy going, who knows what could happen? Because right now they're not going, and it's a bit of an anchor out there. And it's the exact same thing, Ken, as I would suggest we've seen in the utilization of Jonathan Toews all year. Jonathan Toews was used every which way and given every possible opportunity to turn his game around, to snap back into it, to start affecting the game in a way outside of the faceoff circle, or maybe his defensive acumen. And it happened over and over and over and over again. And it just never really caught until finally Scott Arniel moved him to a place where some other people could move into opportunities. Now, I will point out, since he's done that with Jonathan Toews, Ken, this Jets team, it's hard to argue as a whole that they haven't been better. That the amount of time that he was taking and given in trying to find those opportunities and wake up and rediscover a Jonathan Toews of yesteryear, that now that they're not spending as much time or putting him on the ice as much to do that, the Winnipeg Jets are getting better results and they're looking more and more like what they are supposed to look like. But I can't help but look and think that when you're throwing Cole Perfetti out there in that situation, that it's not maybe a little bit of a push-pull in your head of like, maybe Gabe Vilardi goes over there. He'd have an answer specifically of why he did this or didn't do that, or why, it's maybe a matchup or whatever it is. But I just can't help but think there's a little bit of, man, oh man, it's easier to score out there in 3-on-3. Maybe let's get Cole Perfetti out there, because if he can score and get off the schneid and I can get him going, then now we can be, a 2 or 3 line team. And if Gus Nyquist gets one, then holy smokes, maybe all of a sudden we've got 4 lines and some confidence is building and we get this going. Coaches are all about getting players going. And I wonder if this just wasn't an overtime that was used to try and wake guys up and think, boom, we got the second point. Gus Nyquist scored out there to get that done. If there was ever a, jolt of lightning to get this guy's game going, that's what could provide it.
Sure. I mean, the other part of that equation, though, for this game, Gus Nyquist, 2 shots on net and 5 shot attempts. So I think that he must feel like he had the puck in his stick and looked more dangerous than he has looked. And for Perfetti, I mean, Cole, like I said, 3 assists in the last 4 games. Maybe he finds a seam with someone. But yeah, I mean, it's fair to think that that's part of it too, Sean. I mean, the Jets know who is going, and they obviously know who's not going. So trying to get those guys going is part of that for sure. Again, and I'm not arguing for the sake of argument, but the situation with Toews, Sean, I mean, he had 7 points in the first 14 games, and Adam Lowry wasn't there for most of those games. So, and when he was still used more when Lowry was back, it's because they were kind of getting Lowry up to speed. But now it's been a long stretch of cold play when it comes to offensive production, and he's got lots of company in that situation. So again, the Jets need to get about 6 forwards going still, 5 or 6, whatever number you want to use. But yeah, I mean, part of that is extra space. Like Nyquist isn't a burner, but he's used on the power play, so it would make sense that he would want to use him in space in 3-on-3 overtime. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly not a lead pipe lock that he's going to produce in that situation either, because he hasn't found a way to get his first goal yet either. And same thing goes for Nemestikov. I think there's an element of that for Scott Arniel. He knows he needs to have Vlad Nemestikov going. He's not going clearly. He's seen some strides taken, but he's not getting any results. So, like you said, I mean, overtime is a bit of a crapshoot. The Jets have a 3-man unit that has been highly effective and has ended games in the first minute of a lot of overtimes in the last 6 years with Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, and Josh Morrissey. And Sean, guess what? 30 seconds before the Senators won the game, Mark Scheifele makes one of the most ridiculous passes through the, 6-inch seam between Brady Tkachuk's skates, and it ends up on Kyle Connor's stick in a situation where we've seen Kyle Connor bury that chance on numerous occasions. It took a obscene save by Linus Ullmark for that game to not end in a 3-2 Jets win. And then we're having a complete, nobody cares who was on the ice for overtime if that goal gets buried, but that's not the case right now for the Jets. So yeah, naturally we're going to talk about it and kind of have some questions about it.
Yeah. I got to say this. While there's been some issues with scoring, there hasn't been with Logan Stanley. Boy, oh boy, look at him go. And right, the way that he's scoring, you could also score a great rate with Cambrian Credit Union. Getting a mortgage doesn't have to throw you off your game. While you focus on home sweet home, our friends at Team Cambrian Credit Union take care of the mortgage part with their low rates. Whether you're looking for a new home, renewing, or making the switch, Cambrian is your mortgage MVP. They can help make the next season of your mortgage path easier and help save you money. Now, that is what we call a win. Head to cambrian.mb.ca/rates for more, or just head on down to one of your Cambrian locations, like myself and Mrs. Renny are set to do in just a couple of weeks as we go re-up our mortgage. Looking forward to it. Okay, let's get into Logan Stanley and the fourth highest. We can after this. The fourth highest scoring Winnipeg Jet on the season. I just have to say this, Ken. For a guy, and you and I talked a little bit about this in the second intermission, I don't know that there was ever a player that took as much of a beating from the Winnipeg Jets audience and fan base as Logan Stanley. Maybe the all-time biggest, and I don't just say that because he's 6'7", maybe the all-time biggest punching bag that the Winnipeg Jets have ever had. I wonder how many of those folks will go dormant and do the old Homer Simpson walking backwards into the
bush,
walking back out with their Logan Stanley jersey on. But just what's working for him, Ken?
Yeah, activation station for Logan Stanley. And I mean, we talked about this with Sam Cosentino on Saturday, Sammy the Scarf. I mean, the one thing Logan gets, grief for, people think he's not a mobile player. I mean, he's not a burner, but he's a guy that gets around pretty well for a 6'7" guy. He's got a pretty good nose for the net. And, as Scott Arniel pointed out in the morning, he's a guy that has always been able to get his shot through. And he's a guy who's smart enough that when the lane is blocked, he shoots it wide on purpose to get the bank off the end boards. He's starting to show his offensive instincts a little bit more, Sean. He knows when to, and he was asked flat out about it. He didn't provide a expansive answer in the post game, but he's recognizing when the team has numbers. He's recognizing when it's a safe time to get involved. And right now, when the puck's on his stick, Logan is playing with a level of confidence he has not shown in his career to this point. Yes, we know he had a 2-goal game against Carey Price in the playoff series in Game 4 when they got swept. But, I mean, again, that's a long time ago, and the circumstances were strange. But right now, Logan Stanley is playing with confidence. When he plays an assertive game, he can get a lot of things accomplished. And still, I mean, that's part of what he's doing well. I mean, there are times where he needs to buckle down a bit more defensively in his own end, but now there's some payback on the other things that maybe it's not always going smoothly in the defensive zone, but he's getting more involved offensively. He's working hard at rounding out his game, and I get it. People know it's taken a long time, but Sean, there is a different level of anticipation when the puck is on. Like, there were a lot of groans, whether they were internal or external last year or in the year before. Right now, he's playing like a guy, Sean. I think it was pointed out pretty well in a conversation I had during the intermission as well. Logan's not looking over his shoulder, wondering when the 7th D-man is coming in to kick him out of the lineup. And when you remove that mental barrier from your game, you can unlock some certain things. And some of that is confidence related, but a lot of that is between the ears, Sean. And when a player can get that figured out, some guys figured out at 19 years old, but not everyone gets to that point. Even when you're a highly touted first-round draft pick, we know it was going to take time. He was a project when he was drafted, but he's starting to show some signs of the player they were hoping for. Now, again, you can argue about how long it's taken and all those things. There's been a lot of sweat equity, from both sides, the investment by the team in the development and the investment on the player. We know he wanted to get out at one point at a trade deadline, but both sides have stuck together. But Sean, the interesting part of this discussion, maybe not for today, but down the road, Logan Stanley's a pending UFA. And what we know about teams are they're looking for secondary scoring from the back end. Every single team in the NHL. I'm not out here saying Logan's cashing in on a massive payday, but he's upping his own stock, both for himself, for the team he's playing for, and he's probably got some other pro scouts looking and saying, oh, well, with the right partner, this guy might be even better on this other team that I scout for. So that'll be interesting to see how all of those things unfold. But again, we know that the Jets have wanted to see this version, which means they're probably going to go out of their way to get an extension for him at some point. Now, again, I'm not saying it's going to be a massive payday or a raise, but I think he has positioned himself for the Jets to want to continue to watch him grow under their watch.
I think a lot of people talk about Logan Stanley and the criticisms that he's taken, well-deserved. They're right about that. And there was a reason for people to be frustrated. I think they were a little fervent about it. But
they were ready to drive him to the airport, Sean.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But the funny part about this is the reverse thing. Joe from Winnipeg says, Stanley's a goal scorer, not a fighter. The thing that I think that we're seeing here now, and someone had said it earlier on, Stan had said it last time, Sammy the Scarf had said it last time. It's a confidence thing, right? Here we go. Roy Mack says, Scarf said it, confidence, no longer afraid to try something anymore. I agree with this, but the question is, where does that confidence come from? And I see it like this. There's a handful of players that ever enter the NHL that are able to come from the juniors or college or wherever they were and just continue being that player. You're talking the Macklin Celebrinis, even Bedard had a little bit of a learning curve. Sidney Crosby was able to do it. Alex Ovechkin was able to do it. The all-timers are able to do it. Everybody else needs to learn the same lesson. Now, those lessons look different for different players. Matthew Schaefer is another guy who's doing it right now, I guess. So maybe more than a handful, but those are rare. Those are unicorns, right? And what it typically takes is you have to be able to come into the league and find what works for you to be an everyday NHLer, right? Cole Perfetti, great example of it last year. I know he seems to have moved away from it, but last year, instead of being that try and score from distance or set up from distance kind of player, he needed to get gritty. He needed to get on his board work. He needed to be a prick like he said he was last year and get to the front of the net. And that started to work for him. He could use more of that in his game this year. Logan Stanley was a scoring defenseman at junior, and he came in, and I think the thing that held Stanley back for years is the Winnipeg Jets weren't saying to him, stop what you're doing and stop trying to score. I don't think they ever said that to him. I think what they said to him is, we need you to be a more steady defenseman and really focus on taking care of that end of the ice first and foremost and get that locked down. And B, we think you can be the kind of guy who can make life miserable for the opposition. And that's what we want to see from you back there, okay? And I think Logan Stanley isn't a fighter at the heart of it. He's not. When I see Logan Stanley fight, he's not the guy whose eyes light up and he tries to punch the other guy's block off. Logan Stanley usually tries to hold the guy on the end of his arm and not get tagged in the fight. And if he gets some, that's fine. But he usually looks to me like a lot of fighters do in this day and age, like a guy who's just trying to survive the fight, just trying to get through the fight. But he's able to enforce his will in the front of the net in ways that he didn't do in the past. And I think what happened here is he fought it for such a long time. Like so many, you hear all these stories about what good players Bob Probert and Ty Domi were when they were in junior. And then they come up and everyone just thinks they can do that. And I think Logan Stanley was worried that he was going to get lost in that. But I don't think that's what the Winnipeg Jets were ever asking. They were asking him to be really solid, stable, defensively, a disruptor in front of the net, a guy who takes the other team off their game, and a guy who drops the mitts every once in a while to help out with the Adam Lowrys, and when he was here, Brendan Dillon and guys like that. And now, once you've got that, what you have in yourself is an everyday NHLer. Whatever else you do on top of that, you have value for us to do that. Now, when you get that locked down and that is your foundation, you want to go out there and try and score and get back to what you were in junior? Go for it. You know who else did that, Ken? Josh Morrissey. Josh Morrissey was told he needed to work on his defensive game, and he went and turned it around in the summer and became an unbelievable defensive defenseman and almost forgot who he was offensively in junior until Rick Bowness came along and said, hey, wake up out of your fever
Right.
dream and remember what you were, right? I think what we're seeing from Logan Stanley right now is the confidence of now being a full-time NHLer who knows that he's got a role that works, that helps his team, and that he can play night in and night out, whether or not the puck goes in the net or not. And now that he's got that figured out, now he can take the opportunities to jump out of that, jump into the play, and try and score some goals. And I think that's what you're seeing from a guy who, you talked about that Carey Price. You see that shot from the point when he gets opportunities. Logan Stanley has shown, like you talked about, the pass off the backboards and those kind of things. He's shown a little bit of a knack for being offensively gifted, showing it right now. And he's doing it, in my mind, because Logan Stanley became what I think he tried to push back and fight against becoming for so long. Finally accepted it, finally understood what the Winnipeg Jets were asking from him, did it, and then now is able to go rediscover the junior player he was all those years ago, just the same as Josh Morrissey did it. Not everyone comes into the league as a Quinn Hughes. Not everyone comes into the league as a Cale Makar. Everyone else has to learn how to be a foundational player in the NHL and then build from there. And we're seeing that I think Logan Stanley fought it for longer than most players do, finally accepted it, and now we're seeing what comes on the other side of that. Ken, I would like to say that here I was asked for, where is it? Okay, a loser point headband from Paul Roberts. So why don't we do that? Why don't we make this a Sean's headband version of the Kenny and Renny show? Here we go. On the road for that game in St. Louis, and I already packed the headband, so I got to go with the backup headband, which has always been
a good backup. It's a good
backup. And you know who's not a backup, who will be first in your lineup when you get going with them, is go see Myers Drugs for all your pharmaceutical needs, your supplemental needs, your health food needs. They will rise to the top of your list if you give them a chance, folks. And what you don't need to do a lot to give them a chance, because they deliver everywhere in the city. So give them a call and let them show you what they can do. And Ken, why don't you give Sweet Lou a shout out before we move on?
You bet. For folks who have realty needs you'd like to have met, contact our main man, Lou Ferlin, at Roll LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@louferlin.ca. That's LOU at LOUFURLAN.ca. Lou Ferlin, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including this podcast. Right. That's a Ken Patera headband, I think. Maybe a Kurt Henning or going
more Ken Patera. I agree.
Going way back for Ken Patera, AWA special.
There you go.
Go to the YouTube, you youngsters out there. Go to the YouTube.
Yeah. Here, just a quick, because it came across my timeline today, a quick lesson about the AWA. Right before Hulk Hogan goes to the WWF and gets put into a feud with the Iron Sheik and wins the heavyweight championship, which is like my kind of coming to wrestling moment. That's how long ago that happened. I loved Hulk Hogan when I was a kid. But he's in the AWA and he's fighting for their heavyweight championship against Nick Bockwinkel.
Yes.
And Nick Bockwinkel, he ends up winning a match against him, and the crowd thinks that, and people love Nick Bockwinkel, right? But the crowd thinks that Hulk Hogan has won, but the ref gives the win to Nick Bockwinkel, who keeps the heavyweight championship, and the crowd loses their mind. This happens in St. Paul, Minnesota, by the way, and they are so upset about it that it just kind of works against Nick Bockwinkel and the AWA. Vince McMahon swoops in, grabs Hulk Hogan, makes him champion, and it's like 2 years later, the AWA is non-existent. What a cultural shift moment right there. Like, you put the AWA strap on Hulk Hogan, and who knows, wrestling may be entirely different today based on that. But sorry about going off in a different direction, but you talked about the AWA and you got me going in a different direction. Regardless. Okay. Johnson Group got you covered. Play of the game. What do you got?
I know you got a couple other good ones, but I'm going to point to the penalty kill where the Jets were stuck on the ice for many of them for the entire 2 minutes, and some of them didn't get off. Dylan Sandberg didn't get off for 2:30 or 2:40 in the game. Now, again, a lot of straight-legged play, and yes, there were some close calls. And Sean, to your point that we discussed, not all clean handles by the Sens, a couple bad bounces, a couple mishandles. But the fact that they not only survived that penalty kill, but got a boost from it, I think was why I'm going to choose that singular moment or a singular moment over the 2 minute span for a penalty kill that had been struggling in terms of what they've been giving up in terms of goals. That was a big moment of the game. That's why I'm choosing that one. But you've got a couple other good ones.
I've got a couple here. One is, and people will remember this, Pionk is beat. The puck is chipped behind him and he's beat, and he throws like a last minute desperation hip check that if he doesn't make contact, it's going to be an obvious 2-on-1 in that situation. And he just kind of throws everything he has into shooting sideways and just catches the player, but in catching him, pins him and erases him on the board. Just a great got you covered. Pionk having himself covered. And I'm going to throw this one out there because, people like I talked about Logan Stanley being the punching bag. Everyone sees what's happening here. Luke Schenn has become the next punching bag for the Winnipeg Jets that fans are all over. You see it all over the internet. You see it all over Twitter, all over Instagram. You see it in our chat room here. There is a point on one of the power plays, the early power play in the second period, where there's a cross ice pass. It is one that Hellebuck is not getting the jump on. It's probably going to be a one-timer heading into the back of the net. I believe it's Tim Stützle that the pass is coming to. And I wrote this to you, Schenn with the got you covered on that cross ice pass. Yes, that was Samberg-esque. I always talk about Samberg and how at the last minute, he always has the long stick and he kind of figures out the play that everybody else misses. Schenn had it in that moment. I truly believe that that puck is in the back of the net if he does not make that play. So for all the folks out there who are looking and rightfully so saying he messed up on that first Nick Cousins goal and it ends up in the back of the net, I'm a believer that while he costs the Winnipeg Jets a goal in that situation, he took one off the board, which is all you can ask from a guy. If he's going to mess up in a game, if he can go get it back for you, that's all you can ask at that stage. The most you can ask is that they don't cause anything on their end and they add on the other end. But I do believe on this night, Schenn erased his mistake. And you may think that, you may not. Regardless, it is Ken's and my Johnston Group got you covered plays of the game. And hey, do you run a small business in Canada? Look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is the simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. And Ken, that brings us to our hashtag, the keg save of the game. What do you got? There's a decent
There's a bunch of them. Yeah.
Here.
A couple honorable mentions for sure. The David Perron chance in the second was a good one. Allmark's save on Kyle Connor in overtime is the most important save of the game. But I think that the keg save in this one is going to be the Hellebuck on Brady Tkachuk. Now Brady gets the last laugh at the end of the game. And Sean, it's so interesting, and I don't want to go on a tangent here, but I thought Brady was a little bit quiet in terms of his physical nuisance side of the game today. But you look at the score sheet at the end of the game, 5 shots on net, 8 shot attempts, 2 hits, 1 blocked shot, and he has the overtime winner. So, I mean, he's the first star of the game. So, I mean, in a game where it wasn't as much on the rough housing side and maybe didn't take 5 or 6 runs at guys, but he was still one of the best players on the ice. And then Jake Sanderson was the other guy that really stood out for Ottawa. But anyways, the save on Brady Tkachuk early in the third is my choice for keg save the game.
There was one that I thought was really important, and I believe it was again on Tim Stützle. It's going in the net. The angle that I had, and I texted you, it was going in perfectly. There's a stick save that Connor Hellebuck makes, which is, again, I think Ullmark's save is the most important of the game. That is one that I think that he was actually beat, and I think he actually saved it. Like, I think it's one of those ones where, you know how goalies will tell you that they, you know, they save that one with their stick, and you know they're completely and totally full of BS. I think this is one where it's not. I think Connor Hellebuyck makes that save, which I think is the nicest save of the game. Quick one before we close this down. Who do you think won the Sean Reynolds Award on this game? Who do you think was the better goalie in that game?
I think it was Hellebuck, but like by a whisker.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. But I mean, if it's by a whisker and the most important save of the game
Sure.
is made by the other guy, don't you kind of have to switch the tie to the runner in that situation?
I just think that Hellebuck had the tougher workload, so I'm giving him like tie to the runner in that situation, grading on a curve, even though he gives up one more. I mean, he faced 31. The attempts were pretty similar. I have a great appreciation for the Patrick Waugh windmill, but
Yeah.
Ullmark had 3 unnecessary windmills where he caught it basically at his pad and went for the full windmill. So
all you folks out there, you love it when Hellebuyck does it, and you give it to other goalies when they do it. You're all ridiculous, all of you, every last one of you. But regardless of
go to the replay.
I mean, I'm not debating that it didn't happen. I'm just debating people being upset about it when their guy's not doing it. Anyways, that's Ken's and my hashtag the keg saves of the game, brought to you by the fine folks at the keg. Hey, all you need to do if you want a $50 gift certificate from the folks at the keg is to share with us your hashtag the keg save of the game. You do that, like I said, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg, each location finer than the last. And our winner from our last show is, let me see if I can read this right, MMC Stucco 20. MMC Stucco 20. You know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name. Send me an email. I will have the fine folks at the keg send you a $50 gift certificate. If you do all that, usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg, each location finer than the last. And for all you folks out there, I am way behind on this and getting these things out. So let me just know I've seen your emails. I've got everyone queued up here. You will be getting your gift cards. It's been a crazy stretch here. I'll be getting them out to you. Just know that. So MMC Stucco, you need to join that list. And that's about that, Ken. Got anything to say before we go?
No, fun game and an interesting stretch ahead. Last home game for the Jets before the Christmas break. They've got 3 road games on the horizon. And like I said, fun game today. 2 good teams trying to get themselves from below to above the playoff line. They're in tight races. And, we're going to see the Jets, and you and I are going to see Ottawa in a couple weeks here, or not even a couple weeks. It's going to be sooner than later. So another game coming up.
And then I follow them to New York after that. So, I'm always thinking about my opening. So I got Wednesday, and I'm always thinking, trying to have interesting things to say at the beginning. And one of the things that I was queued up and ready to go was that the Winnipeg Jets were coming off back-to-back wins for the first time since mid-November, and I can't say that anymore. So some creativity required for Renny.
You'll figure it out on the flight. I have faith in you.
For sure.
Or after the Blues City Deli. Maybe after the Blues City Deli.
Yes. Any of you fine folks heading down to watch that game in St. Louis, remember, Pappy's Smokehouse, best barbecue place that I've been to in all of America. And honestly, the Blues City Deli is my favorite sandwich shop anywhere in North America. So make sure you head on down there. If you're going down there, you just may see Renny and the broadcast crew down there if you go. Other than that, thanks for joining us, folks. Appreciate your time here tonight. If you appreciate the time spent in this space, we would implore you to appreciate the contributions by our sponsors who fight to keep the conversation going in this space. For us, that's Jim Pattison Toyota on Region, Vittorio Rossi, Cambrian Credit Union, Pristine Roofing, Sweet Lou Ferlin, Flame and Comfort, Myers Drugs, the Kenny and Renny OGs at the Johnston Group, and of course the Keg. Thank you to them. Thank you to all of you. Let's get together and do this all over again after the Jets play the Blues on Wednesday. Bye-bye.